In the meantime, I'm joined by the Energy Minister, Josh Frydenberg. Thanks very much for your time. Energy and environment, of course, within your responsibilities, in part, is water as well. And I want to ask you about Nick Xenophon and the warnings from Tony Passon, your Liberal colleague in South Australia, in relation to the policies on the Murray-Darling. Is there any backtrack here in terms of water flows going to South Australia? Absolutely not. We're absolutely committed to delivering on the Murray-Darling Basin in full, on time and on budget. You have to understand the context, the history of this sensitive issue. It's one of the great legacies of John Howard, the Murray-Darling Basin Plan, which Malcolm Turnbull was intimately involved in. There was a Water Act that was passed in 2007. There was a Water Plan that came into legislation in 2012. It involves 4 states and the ACT. It's all designed to increase the benefits both to industry and to the environment. But is there or is there not a plan supported by the Deputy Prime Minister, Barnaby Joyce, to withhold 450 gigalitres of environmental flows? There's no such plan. Currently we have 1,900 gigalitres. The plan involves getting to 2,750. There's an additional 450, which is what South Australia is focused on. What Barnaby Joyce was doing was just pointing out the obvious, which was one of the challenges we have in reaching that 450. That's an obvious point. But as for the government's position, we're firmly committed to delivering the Murray-Darling Basin on time. So what are the problems in delivering that? Because in terms of South Australia, as your colleague, Mr Passon, said, a regional member from South Australia, that this is red hot politically. It's red hot, but you have to get the support of the other states. You have to get proper efficiency measures. You have to stick to the wording in the legislation, which is to avoid a significant economic and social impact. That's the sensitivities when you're getting water from one area, giving it to another. How does it impact on the local communities? That's in the legislation. So we're going to stick to the legislation and stick to the plan. Well, it's being perceived in South Australia as you backtracking on it. There's no backtrack. Well, I can say as the Environment Minister, my message to the people of South Australia and to Nick Xenophon is absolutely clear and absolutely unequivocal. We are committed to delivering the Murray-Darling Basin plan in full, on time and on budget. All right, let's look at the latest Energy Council statement in relation to South Australia again. This is on an interconnector, another one. This would help provide stability for South Australian power supplies. What's the gist of this latest statement from the Energy Council? Is it viable? Is it needed, given the other movements we're seeing in energy supply in this country in terms of renewable technology and so on? Well, as you know, the energy markets are very complex. They involve competing jurisdictional responsibilities between the states and the federal government. And we've had, after the South Australian blackout, a real wake-up call that energy security needs to be our #1 priority. Now, one of the ways to secure South Australia's supply could be through more connectivity with other states, i.e. when there's not enough power being generated in South Australia, that it can get power from another state where that power has been generated, namely New South Wales, because there are already interconnectors, 2 of them, linking Victoria into South Australia. Now, this would be an expensive proposition. Work is underway as to assess how much that actually would cost. There's a proper regulatory process. It's called a RIT-T process through the Australian Energy Regulator. But this has been discussed by energy ministers. Tom Katsantonis, who's the South Australian minister, has been a strong proponent of it. Ultimately, consumers... Is there a chance it could be redundant, though, once it's this interconnector, once it was built? $3 billion is the estimated cost. Well, is there a chance that once it's all... If it is pursued, that it could be redundant by the time it's delivered, given reductions in other power supplies like black coal in New South Wales? Well, black coal will continue to be a very big part of the energy mix going forward for decades to come. We have to accept that. When it comes to South Australia's reliance and heavy reliance on wind and solar, these are intermittent sources of power, namely when the wind's not blowing. and the sun's not shining, power's not being generated. And battery storage today is not at the level you'd hope it would be in order to store that power to supply it 24/7 as you can for coal or gas or indeed for hydro. So the prices or the costs of an interconnector vary from anywhere from 500 million to, as you say, $2.5 billion. Work is still underway. What we want is the best outcome from consumers, and that's energy security followed by energy affordability.
Now, you're going to be meeting with your environment ministers, your counterparts this Friday in relation, well, the big issue is the Great Barrier Reef ahead of a status update to UNESCO. What is the status of the reef?
Well, we inherited from the Labor Party a terrible situation with the Barrier Reef listed on UNESCO's World Heritage Committee's in danger watch list.
Can't blame a political party for that, sure.
Well, they didn't do the work that we've done, and as a result...
But there are broader impacts here in terms of climate change and bleaching and so on?
Oh, well, that wasn't the main issue. The bleaching event only occurred more recently after Labor had left office. They hadn't put the money and the effort into the water quality issues in the Barrier Reef, which Greg Hunt successfully did. And Greg Hunt was successful in having the Barrier Reef removed from UNESCO's watch list. Now, we're putting in a report at the end of this year. Hopefully that gets the tick from UNESCO. I've recently had meetings in Paris with key officials in this regard. But the government...
Is it healthy, though,
well,
the reef? How would you characterise it right now?
Well, I would say it is healthy. That there has been a major bleaching event, but unlike some of the reports, it has only led to a portion in the northern part being bleached, and some 22% of the northern part has had a fatality to it. But the overall health of the reef is good. We have a Reef 2050 plan together with the Queensland Government, which is seeing some $2 billion invested both by us and the state government. We're committed to better water quality, innovation, and dealing with climate change.
Are you encouraged by dealing with climate change? To pick up on that, Trump has said this morning in an interview with the New York Times just an hour or so ago that he's looking very closely at the Paris Agreement and he's got an open mind to it. This after previous pronouncements that he was going to withdraw from it. Are you encouraged by that sentiment from Mr. Trump this morning?
Well, we'll just have to wait and see, Kieran, because he doesn't come into office until the 20th of January.
It's not long. But
it's not long.
So these words now are
important, and there's also his appointments to the position of Energy Secretary, to the work of the EPA and other key agencies. So we'll wait and see what happens. America is responsible for 16% of the world's emissions. They're the second largest emitter. They played a key role in the ratification by more than 100 countries of the Paris Agreement. Australia is getting on with the job of meeting its 2030 targets, just as we beat our first Kyoto target and just as we're on track to meet our 2020 target.
But are you reassured by those comments today from Mr. Trump?
Well, look, obviously there's a lot of discussions going on within the United States new administration to be, in the Trump administration. I don't want to preempt what those outcomes will be. I just want to see.
But either way, it's going to be, you said to me a week or so ago that there's still many months, if not years, before they could pull out of that deal, given the various ratifications that have gone on and agreements signed between the US and China bilaterally as well.
Well, as you know, under Article 28 of the Paris Agreement, there is a 4-year period, both a notice period and a wait period, where countries who have ratified have to go through that process in order to pull out of the agreement. So that would apply to the United States. But I don't want to preempt what Donald Trump and his administration will do, other than to say Australia will continue to work very effectively with the United States in reducing global emissions, but also in improving efficiency standards and outcomes for consumers.
In his statement via YouTube yesterday, the President also promised to cancel restrictions on the production of American energy. Do you welcome his comments in that regard, or is this counterproductive to the US efforts within the Paris Agreement and on climate change more broadly?
No, I'd absolutely welcome efforts to reduce regulation and to encourage gas exploration and energy development. I mean, in fact, this is one of the problems we're having in Australia, and I've been outspoken on, which is the effective moratoriums on gas development, both in Victoria, my home state, and in New South
So
Wales.
you're on the same page as him on that front?
I'm always in favour of cutting red tape and regulation.
So what are the implications, though, from what he's saying in terms of their efforts to reduce emissions?
Well, it's good news for consumers in the United States because they've gone through the shale gas revolution where they're paying only $2 to $3 a gigajoule for gas, whereas in Australia we're paying $8 to $9 a gigajoule. This hurts households and this hurts investors and businesses. So we need more gas, we need more exploration.
Minister Frydenberg, appreciate your time. Thanks.
Great to be with you.
After the break, the forum.